today's episode, we're going to chat about how to make prenatal visits more fun and dynamic, and some different activities that we can use to help us accomplish that. So one of the things that I think is important to mention is that I became a childbirth educator first and a doula second. And so a lot of what I bring to my prenatal visits come from the learning that I have on the childbirth ed side, and really the learning and theory around adult education. Now, none of us want to be lectured to. And of course, even just having a conversation in a prenatal visit for 90 minutes or 2 hours, it makes for a really long conversation. We want to be talking about things that help our people learn, our clients learn, and really retain that information. And remember that cone of learning, and we think about how much percentage of stuff that we remember if we're lectured to or if we see it. But it starts to change when we're actually seeing it and hearing it, and when we're actually doing something with it, when we're getting hands-on. That's when people are really going to remember. So what I wanted to do is go through my labor bag today, and some of the things that we talked about last week when we talked about what to include in a doula bag. But not everything that I have in my doula bag is for me to use on clients. A lot of it is for me to use in the prenatal visits. So for example, our trusty baby. I think having a baby model is a really helpful thing every time that I'm talking about baby stuff and baby positioning, if we're talking about breastfeeding or if we're talking about infant soothing and different things like that. It's really helpful to have a baby model present. Now, again, this is a sort of a more official one, but you don't need to have something super official. You could just have a $10, Walmart baby for that matter. So that's something that I find I use a lot. Of course, I'm going to pull out my rebozo, and I'm going to actually work with my clients using the rebozo. We're going to figure out what kinds of things that they find comfortable and not comfortable, and what works and what doesn't work, and why would we use it. And I talk about things like the three sisters from Spinning Babies, which I now teach every client, and I would encourage you to look at. I'll actually post the link below, but that's something that I find really, really useful as well. And one of the things that I really could not imagine doing a prenatal visit without is my handy dandy pelvis. I find that there's something about seeing this that helps people understand, especially when we are talking about pushing and we talk about upright positioning for pushing, we can show how that baby has to come up over the tailbone and under the pubic bone, and all of the dynamic of what's happening here. How the pelvis is not a solid block of bone, but that there's movement and it moves around. And when we get into squatting positions, how we can open up the pelvic outlet, or it can be, smaller or open depending on the position that we're in. That when we're leaning on our sacrum, that it's compressing the opening that we have here. And that there's a lot that we can do that changes this. I find that those things are really helpful in understanding some discomforts and also what's going on around just around all of this, without even stepping out of scope and getting into the teaching or the childbirth ed stuff. It's just people understanding the basics about all of this. So when I'm referring to things, when we're talking about things, I find it's really helpful to have these visual models. And again, although this pelvis is expensive, there are some that are much less expensive that you can buy as well. There's some material ones, or I even saw one doula that had a little mini one that was made out of material. And again, that would do the same kind of thing. Again, this is sort of an official placenta model and showing the amniotic sac and the cord. And again, it's just I find in general conversation about what they're learning in their childbirth classes and the questions that they have and what's going on in the process of labor is that it helps me to be able to have that visual. So one of the things I do in a prenatal visit when we're talking about comfort is I just start pulling things out from my doula bag and I say, hey, what do you think that this might be used for? And do you think that this is something that you would like? And as I'm going through all of this, I actually have them. I create something I call the comfort measure pie wheel. Let's see where I have it here. Here it is. So basically it's just a colorful pie chart that I created. You can just go in Word and create something like this. And as we're going through our prenatal visits, every time that they come across something that I pull out or that we talk about together, or maybe that they learned in their prenatal classes, that they want to try, want to use in their labor, I get them to add it to this. And what starts to happen is they start to realize there are so many things that they have access to make themselves comfortable. we're not reliant upon a system or a medication. A medication might be one of these things. A doula might involve some of these things. A partner might involve some of these things, but a lot of them are things that they can do all on their own. And they start to see how they can do things on their own, and also how we all contribute to creating the environment of comfort in labor. And so that's something that I really, really encourage, is that they're writing things down, because writing things down is something that encourages retention in what we remember and learn as well. We talk about things like massage, doing a hand massage and foot massage. And as I bring it out, we talk about it. And then if they're comfortable with touch, then I'm going to actually do a hand massage. If they have a partner, I'm going to teach the partner. The partner's going to take one hand, I'm going to take the other. And this is such a nice way to, especially to end a prenatal visit. It establishes touch in a non-threatening way, and really, it's just really one of those things that people really remember about our prenatal visits together. So we talk about that. We talk about food and beverages for partner to have. We talk about, being hot and cold, and how to cope with that, and different things that we're going to do for that. Maybe what they're going to wear. It leads to that kind of conversation. We're going to talk about taking notes. I have a pen. I also have, I tell them that sometimes I take notes on my phone, and that's because about once every 30 minutes or so, I take about 30 seconds and I just jot down what's been going on. If a doctor or nurse has come in and what they've said and what's happening, because for me, notes is an important part of me being able to piece together their birth story, helping to fill any gaps that maybe they have. So that's an important part for me of what I do. We also talk about the environment of birth. So again, I pull it out, we pull out one of our little LED tea lights, we talk about the environment, we talk about whether they like, light or dark. Then that leads us to thinking about music, and maybe bringing pillows from home and that smell from home and their favorite scents. And it just really creates such a beautiful conversation about all of that. I've got so much stuff in here, it's nuts. I do have baby-related things, and these are some things that we talk about in a postpartum visit. Sorry, not a postpartum visit, in a prenatal visit when we're talking about postpartum. So I have all of these different things around postpartum. So the same way in one visit I'm going to talk about comfort, and we're going to be pulling out stuff and using this to start our discussion and to keep us flowing. I'm also going to do it in our last prenatal visit when we're talking about postpartum. And then I talk about things like house cleaning and accepting help from other people. And we talk about, what else do we talk about here? Yeah, so I've got this handy dandy thing. You guys know what this is? If you've got hemorrhoids or stitches and you're really uncomfortable, donut? Yes. So we talk about things like that. One of the things I talk about, and I use this in both talking about prenatal comfort in our prenatal visit and talking about comfort measures, but also when we talk about postpartum stuff, is that all of this is a bit of a roll of the dice, isn't it? What we're going to get, the kind of labor we're going to get, the kind of baby we're going to get, the kind of postpartum recovery we're going to get. There's a lot about this that we're not going to be able to control. And so we want to make sure that we're bringing that element into the conversation as well. I'm always interested, though. It's always kind of funny for people to talk about what they think that this represents, and they come up with a lot of different ideas. And you know what? Sometimes I kind of just go with it. Right? One of the things that I really enjoy and I find helps people to understand, I'm just trying to dig them all up, is using elastics to talk about the effacement and dilations. Of course, we've got all of these prenatal things. Oh, I've got so much stuff in here. I've got a whole bunch of scripts for visualizations and relaxations that I use all the time. So that's a big one. Postpartum, we're talking about, maybe we talk about stretch marks. We talk about nipple ointment. We talk about taking care of ourselves, relaxation in the prenatal period. We're talking about chapstick for labor and the breathing. And I can't find my elastics. I like this one. This is a good one too. I always say, hey, what do you think this represents? And they're not always entirely sure. I think sometimes they think I'm being goofy. But really it's about bringing your sense of humor to the birth, right? Jeepers creepers, I can't find my elastics. They're somewhere in here. I bring 3 different sizes of elastics. I have a really thick one, I have this size one, and I have a really, really thin one. And we talk about that. We use that to talk about the effacement of the cervix. Because a lot of times I find that people are going to the hospital sometimes a little bit earlier than when they could be admitted, because of course that early labor, those sensations of early labor, and they just expect it to go quickly. I'm also finding, unfortunately, that more and more of my clients have not taken childbirth education, and so they don't really understand those concepts. And so I like to discuss it a little bit in our prenatal visit, just the concept of what's happening in early labor. And we know that the cervix is effacing and it's dilating, and of course the baby's coming down into our pelvis, and that labor progress is really those 3 things together. And I just want them to understand the general concept of effacement so that they understand why early labor takes a long time. When we have that thick elastic, they can see that it's really hard to open. But when we get to the thinner elastic, they can see that the thinner elastic opens more easily. And that just helps them understand visually, that really elusive and kind of strange concept of the cervix effacing. My favorite activity is this one, the ideal birth game. And I've written about this in one of my blog posts on prenatal visits at doulaschool.ca/blog. So I encourage you to go there for that visit. This is a 30-minute activity, and it goes over so many different things. So basically what I'm doing is I'm going through each one, and we're asking people what they prefer. So each card has opposites of each other. So for example, this one has pain medication, and then the other side says non-medicated comfort measures. And we say, hey, what do you know about pain medication? What did you learn about in your childbirth class? And how do you feel about that? Is that something that you're planning on including on your pie chart? Or is that something that you wanted to avoid? And what they do is they have 15 different cards here with different options, and they place them all in front of them, the side up that they would prefer. And then what we do is we say, you know what, we talk about how labor doesn't always go exactly how we hope, and that sometimes it's going to go down a different path. And what would be the first 5 cards that, even though they might have a preference for non-medicated comfort measures, that if labor started going down a different path, that they'd be okay with pain medication or one of the other things. And so they have to flip over 5 cards, and they now get the opposite. It's an opportunity for us to help them understand what kinds of things go together. So for example, they could have that they want to eat and drink in labor instead of having an IV. But if they get induced with Pitocin, then they automatically have to flip the IV card. If they get an epidural, they have to get the IV card. So it helps them to understand that cascade of interventions and how things go together. And we know that some things always go together and some things may go together. What we want them to understand are the things that always go together. So I think as a doula, we know that if someone's getting an epidural, that they're going to get an IV. And so when they flip the epidural card, like, okay, cool, so we're going to get an IV now as well. And if they're induced, they're going to be on continuous fetal monitoring in most places. Now, part of this is also understanding what's happening in your environment. And we know in obstetrics, it's not black and white, it's a lot of grays. And that things can vary and change from hospital to hospital and practice to practice. Even within a hospital, depending if you got one doctor or another doctor, one nurse or another nurse, it can all be different. So just helping people understand that as well. What are some other things that I have in here? I always have some balloons. Good to have latex-free balloons in case anyone ever has allergies. And I have balloons to talk about if I'm going to talk about breasts. So some of you might have a knitted breast. Or what I like to do, having the breast, is that I can actually kind of blow it up in the size of breast of the person that I might be working with. And sometimes I have a marker in here as well, and I might actually draw a nipple, for example, on here to show. Also, it can be used to represent the placenta. No, not the placenta, the uterus. You could show where the placenta might be in their uterus based on that. The other option too is you might have a knitted uterus. So these are the ones that you can get at Childbirth Graphics or other supply stores. You can also make one yourself if you know anyone that knits, or if you knit, then that's a much more cost-effective way to get them, but they're not terribly expensive. And again, it's something that we're talking about a lot, that we talk about the uterus a lot, and I find having that visual is just a really different experience. I do have this little guy too. In classes, when I'm as a childbirth educator, when I'm teaching about cesarean, and I talk about, we do a cesarean role play, and I'm talking about, the different layers. So if someone, I don't bring this out unless someone has questions, but if someone has questions about a planned cesarean, or maybe they're really, really afraid of having a cesarean, then maybe we're going to talk about it. and we talk about the different layers and we talk about the process. Now, this might not be appropriate for your scope depending on sort of whether you're a childbirth educator or not, or maybe it's just something that you have, to show and someone has prepared for you. So that's another option as well. What else do I have in here? Oh, this is a good one. I have a picture of a baby that I've laminated. And one of the things that I do in a prenatal visit is I ask my clients to write down all the things. So I use a dry erase marker and I have them write down on this baby all the different things they've heard about that happened in the newborn. So maybe they talk about how, maybe they had a sibling or a sister or friend who had a baby that had, a tongue tie, or they put an X on the umbilical cord, and different things. And then you're helping to fill in the gaps of their knowledge based on what they haven't covered, but that is very likely to occur in the first month with baby. So that's another fun activity to do as well. What else? We also do the same activity with the birthing person. So I have that, and we use that to talk about postpartum recovery. What are all of the different things that happen in the postpartum period? And again, they jot it down in there. And then we kind of fill in the gaps. Hey, did you know that this happens and that happens, and different things like that as well. I always have paper available, so if I'm going to draw anything, then that helps me to just visually put things down on paper. And then, like I said, I have a lot of visualizations. I have a couple of different visualizations that I could read through. I always have my phone with me, of course, so that I can play music. And when we're doing comfort measures, and I'm trying out all of these fun little, oh, this is my favorite rebozo. This is my new rebozo. It's so pretty. I just love it. I got this one from doulaessentials.com. We're going to show this and we're going to get them to try it out. And when we do comfort measures, we're not just chatting about comfort measures, we're trying stuff out. Get hands-on, people. As doulas, get hands-on. How does this feel, versus this? And what about, oh gosh, I've got so many different guys. What about this one? What about this one? How does that feel different from this one? And we're trying all of these different things. Maybe we talk about TENS machines and how that feels if you have the proper training and it's in your scope of practice. Maybe you pull out you pull out your kit and you let them see it. You talk about it. Maybe you try it out. We're not using TENS on people before term, but explaining to them the sensation and that kind of thing. What else do we do? Oh, in our postpartum talk, we talk about, these are breast pads. There's so many different things that we can use our doula bag, not just for when we go to births, but we can use it as a talking tool, right? Maybe we use it to talk about contraception after birth. Oh, that just went flying. Talk about diaper cream and all kinds of things that we've got in here. Basically, you can see it's not that big of a bag. Okay, it looks big when I hold it so close up to the camera, but it's not really that big. I have a ton of stuff in here. And I just have everything together and I bring it with me everywhere I go. So it ends up being easy to carry and gives me so many talking points that I don't sit there ever in a prenatal visit thinking, what should I talk about next? And that's not just because I've been doing this for a really long time. It's because I have everything with me all the time. And I'm not constantly having to remember to pack things and bring things and activities. I've got it all in this little kit inside and this big bag. There are my elastics. I was looking for these. I want to show you because I wanted to show you dollar store elastics, but look at this cool one it has, this really, really thick elastic. So this gives me all kinds of different sizes of elastics and that people can actually feel them and see how it feels when we're talking about effacement and the difference and why we dilate so much more quickly when our cervix is more thin. So I hope that that's helpful for you guys, give you some ideas, more on the blog, and give us your comments of what else you do in your prenatals and what you include as well. Talk soon. Bye.